Hey guys, it's Marty and welcome to Two Line Slot Cars. This is a follow-up video on the original video that I did on the DD302, the Difalco controller. I've raced with it quite a bit here recently, and I just want to talk about my feelings for the controller, the settings that I use, and then some changes that I've made just here recently to try to improve my performance with the controller. So let's get into it. So guys, owned the controller for a few months now, and I really, just right up front, you don't have to wait till the end of the video to find out, I really love this controller. It's the DD302 from Difalco. I bought it from Cloverleaf. Shout out to them. Thanks, Mike. I really appreciate sending that out to me. I waited for a long time for them to be in stock, and so as soon as I found out that they were in stock, I ordered one. And Mike sent it right out, and I really, really like it. The traction control, I think, is worth the extra dollars. It really evens out the car coming out of the turns. I really like the settings that it has. It has sensitivity, braking, and the traction control. Again, I really think that traction control is a nice feature. It really just, it eases the throttle, and the control on my plastic track performs really, really well. Straight out of the box. But we've done some racing, and we've done a lot of talking to other racers and what they do, and a lot of guys use the Difalco controller. And Mike, Kurt, and the guys from Cloverleaf, when we ran the 6-hour endurance race on that wood track, I felt like I was just a little too aggressive with the controller, and I was running full sensitivity. I was on 0, as slow as I can make the controller, and I could still, with just the flick of the trigger, flip the car right out of the slot. And I really had felt like I'd run out of adjustment on the sensitivity. When I get on my plastic track here, Bruce's track at Cincy Slots, I don't feel like that. I don't have that same sense with the controller, but on the wood track, I really felt like I just couldn't dial down the sensitivity enough. And in talking to those guys, they talked about they've started experimenting with different networks. And so if you know, the Difalco controller has this piece here, which is an ohm network. So you can change the resistance. It ships with a 290 ohm network straight from the factory. And honestly, that's a good all-around network. I didn't have problems with it. I really felt like I had a good handle on the controller. I could dial it in based on what car I was running. I could dial it in for the track. Felt really, really confident. But when I got on the wood track at Butch's, I had to crank my sensitivity. I had to crank the traction control, and I really felt like I was losing touch with the car. They talked about they started experimenting with higher ohm levels, like up to 520 ohms. And that seems like a lot of resistance. And then the other thing that happened was John Albright kept telling me, Marty, I think you should try the 2-finger trigger. And so a couple weeks ago, I ordered the 2-finger trigger and installed it on the controller, and I purchased the 520 ohm network. And then I did some testing. I basically went to my stack of cars and said, I want a car that is pretty twitchy to run and do this testing with. I want a car that is quick and fast, that feels like it's on the edge all the time, to see if the changing the ohm network really had an impact on the car's performance. And then the other thing I wanted to do is I wanted to run some laps with the regular trigger and then the 2-finger trigger and see if it had an impact on my ability to be smoother. And that's what the guys from Cloverleaf kept talking about, is how that 520 ohm network really allowed them to keep the rear of the car behind the guide, right? It allowed them to be much smoother on the throttle, which basically gave them way more consistent lap times. Maybe not the fastest lap times, but super consistent over a 15-minute heat. They were just super consistent with lap times and keeping the car in the slot. And so I thought, let's order these, let's try them out, let's do some testing. And so I grabbed my Zack Speed sideways Group 5 car. It's an angle winder car. It's set up pretty good. It's quick, just has a standard, standard guide. It's a car that I can drive really fast on my track, but I will have some offs with it because it can be a little twitchy. It is a little tail happy. I tend to like my cars just a touch. I can't seem to get them tuned well enough to just lock in. It's really what I'm getting at. I'm used to driving a car that slides out a little bit, and I knew that this car would be one that would test me. Any of my sideways cars, the Group 5 cars, I knew that I would not struggle with it, but that it would really give me a good look at what the controller is doing. I felt like it would have a big impact. If I tried the Revo slots, if I tried some of the other cars, I just think I've got those tuned really well, and I wouldn't probably see as much difference in the ohm rating in the controller. So I went with the Zack Speed. One, I love this car. I love to drive it. It's a lot of fun. It's really fast, but it can be twitchy. It's the only word I know how to describe. So it can be twitchy, and I thought it would be a really good test. So I ran 50 laps with the controller unchanged. Standard network that it came with from the factory and the single finger trigger. I ran 50 laps with the 520 ohm network and the 2-finger trigger. And then I ran the 2-finger trigger with the 290 ohm to see how much just the trigger impacted the car's performance. And so let's watch a few laps, a little bit of track time, and then I'll come back with the results. Okay, the first test was regular trigger, regular network, 290 network, and the single finger trigger. 50 laps. I ran a fast lap of 5.351, and my lap median time was 5.617. And I had 4 offs. And I think that's the important thing to know, that the car was quite a bit to handle. I felt like I was quick. I felt like the car felt normal to me. And those numbers line up with what I think is normal. But 4 offs over 50 laps, that's probably right. So then I installed the 2-finger trigger and the 520 ohm network, and I did another 50 laps. And this time I had a best lap of 5.117. And my median lap time was 5.287. So I was running some really fast laps. The car was really easy to keep the rear end behind it. I was much smoother, and I thought maybe that was just because I was excited about something new, and I was super focused on trying to improve. So then I decided that I would change back to the standard network, the 290 ohm network, but with the 2-finger trigger, and see what my times were. And the results were, my best lap was a 5.09, which is probably my track record for Group 5 cars, the sideways cars on this track. It was a really fast lap, and I ran a median lap time of 5.269. So over 50 laps, that third 50 laps, I really improved my driving. 2 things to know. With the 2-finger trigger and the 520 ohm, I had 0 offs in 50 laps. Really consistent, really solid. I had 4 offs with the standard network and the single finger trigger. And I had 1 off going back to the 290 ohm network and the 2-finger trigger. So what was the biggest impact? I think the biggest impact for me on my track is the 2-finger trigger. I think it changes the leverage of the controller. So having that second finger on the controller, I can just be smoother in how I accelerate out of a turn. I noticed that I didn't grip the controller quite as hard, and so I didn't have problems with my fingers going numb. Now, I wouldn't normally in a 50 lap, over 50 laps, but over 100 laps, definitely would I be struggling with some dead fingers. I didn't have that problem. So I really think that the 2-finger trigger, I'm still learning with it. I've only had it on for about a week, maybe not even that. Maybe I've had it on for about 3 days. Now that I think about it, I'm curious to know how that's going to translate to the race. I think it's going to be a big difference for me racing at Butch's Wood Track with the 520 ohm network. I think I'm going to get that feeling back with the car that I feel on the plastic track. Like I can feel the car in my trigger. I can't find that on the wood track. I can't connect the controller and the car together with my hand on the wood track. And I'm hoping that these changes to the controller really, really improve that. Will it help at Cincy Slots? It helped here on my track, so I'm sure that it would help at Cincy Slots. I will throw this out. My brother did go racing on Thursday, and I picked him one up for his controller as well. So it was the first time that he'd tried using the 2-finger controller trigger and the 520 ohm network. And he raced his best race. He finished with 46 laps. 47 laps maybe, and no offs. We're always good for a couple of offs, both of us. And so I was super proud to find out that the car was running great, and the controller, he just really had great control of the car and just ran a great race. And so I wish I was there to see it. Proud of him for doing that. He's getting faster and faster. But I think the 2-finger, as I watch how he uses the controller, he already has that second finger up there near the controller. So I think it was a natural fit. I'm sure he still has to get used to it, but it's obvious that it paid dividends on the first night racing with it. Great job, Dusty. Keep up the great work on the track. But guys, if you've thought about a controller, I really can recommend the Difalco. I like this model. It's reasonably priced, great quality. If you do a lot of wood track racing, I would definitely look at getting some other networks that are a little slower networks, some higher numbers. So it comes standard with a 290. You might try one in the 300 range, or one in the 400 range, and maybe that 520, and see how they feel for you. Everybody's going to have a different feel, but I can run my sensitivity at about, I was running it at about a 6 with the 520 ohm, and I run at about one or two on sensitivity, the 290. So what it lets me fine tune a little better, I guess, is what I would say. So do I recommend this? After racing with it for a while, yes, I love this controller. I plan to pick up another controller. So Jim Difalco, if you watch any of my videos, probably got another order coming. I just think that it would be good to have another one here at the track. My son-in-law races. He could use it. John Mark could use it. I just think that having a second controller would be great. From the setting standpoint, I find that I don't mess with the settings a whole lot based on the car. If the car doesn't have a lot of brake, I'll crank up the brakes a little bit. I'm running the brakes at about 6.5 on the controller right now, and I'm running the traction control about the same, about 6.5, 7. If it's a really hot motor, I might crank that up to about an 8. If it has a lot of brake, I might ease that off. I do like my car to roll a little bit, so I like to come in. I'm a momentum driver for sure. Greg told me that, and he was right. He kind of nailed it. I like to push into the turn and let the car kind of coast through a turn and then grab the throttle coming out of the turn. I like to use the momentum of the car. That's where I'm most comfortable. And dialing back some of the brake allows that to happen. So that's about where I run that. And I'm finding that in the sensitivity, I'm right now, I'm setting about 6.5 with the 520 ohm. And I would be up around 1 or 2 if I was running the 290. I think the numbers show that on my plastic track, I can get away with the 290, probably because I know the track inside and out by now. I've got thousands and thousands and thousands of laps on it. I can see where the network really didn't have a huge impact. I was actually able to run a little faster times. But I think the biggest impact was the 2-finger trigger. I really think the more laps I get in, the happier I'm going to be with that. I think that was the best purchase. These are things that I would recommend you try on your Difalco if you've not tried them before. I know there's a handful of people that have moved to the 2-finger that have talked about it in their videos, and I think it's a smart move. I think it's a good move. And as I'm aging, it changes the leverage, and I feel like I can be smoother. And as we get older, our reaction's not quite the same. So being smooth with the trigger is important. And I think the 2-finger trigger allows me to do that easier than the 1-finger trigger. So again, Difalco 302, great controller. I wouldn't hesitate to recommend this to anybody if you're looking to upgrade your controller now that you're getting into some racing. So yeah, check it out. You can buy it direct from Difalco. You can buy it at Cloverleaf. from their website. You also buy it Slot Car Corner. So I'm not sponsored by any of those guys, but I do buy parts from them and check them out. This is something you're interested in. They've been having these in stock lately, so it might be a little easier to get the controller now than it was a few months ago. Yeah, check it out. Hope you enjoy it. And, if you like this kind of content, you want to learn more as I learn more, hit the subscribe button, give me a like, hit the bell so you get notified anytime I put out new videos. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. I hope this is great information for you. Get out there. Don't be afraid to try some new things. Test, practice. That's where you really, really learn. And then you can apply it when you get to the local track and do what my brother did and had his best finish ever. So great job. Hopefully you get a chance to do that. And hopefully you get out there and go do some racing.